When our girls were little, we have 5, not 5 girls, but 5. We had 2 little girls for a long time, and they were very interesting. One day, I was doing something inside, and I heard this blood-curdling scream from the patio, and I knew that somebody had either cut off a limb or was leaping over the fence as a black-hooded ninja warrior stranger. So I raced out to the backyard and didn't see anything except my daughter sitting on the patio. So I scooped her up in my arms and I said, "Honey, what is it? Are you okay?" "It's all right." And she could not even breathe. She was shrieking and trembling so greatly, and she just pointed at the patio. I looked and I didn't see anything, and I looked closer and I saw a little tiny trail of ants. The really tiny ones that you have to get close to see. And I thought, well, bless her heart. This little girl has a problem. And she still hates bugs. She hates bugs, and one of her teenage boys brought bed bugs home from camp a couple years ago. It was horrible. It was horrible. That's a different sermon. But ants, why would I start a sermon about ants? What is it about ants? Well, this little trail of ants that she was so frightened of seemed very purposeful. They looked like they had someplace to go, and they were in a hurry to get there. And they were following each other. They're making this little, a little dotted line. You've seen storybooks, illustrations, ants, dotted lines, right? Pastor Russ, the illustrator, right? So they were following each other in a hurry, as fast as they could go. They had someplace important, and I can see how that might be frightening if you didn't know where they were going, and you thought maybe they were coming after you. They weren't. She never got bitten. She was fine. She recovered. She grew up. I just want you to know that. So, ants, they follow. They're followers. I just want you to think this morning about what it means to be a follower. Now, pick up your worship folder. Open it up. What does it say at the top of each column? Encounter, connect, engage. We don't do that just because it looks good. It does. There's a reason why that's in our worship folder. Encounter, connect, engage. Now back to the ants. Being a follower versus being a trailblazer. Trailblazer sounds exciting, doesn't it? I mean, it's even an NBA team. Yes, I know a little bit about sports, this much. Trailblazer sounds exciting. I got an applause. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? It can be dangerous too, though, if you're a trailblazer and you go the wrong way and you fall off a cliff. That's not such a good thing. If you're following the trailblazer and you fall off a cliff too, that's even worse. But to be a follower, what does it really mean to be a follower? Followers are sometimes, kind of cut down, belittle, say, you're just a follower, or you're just a yes man, you're just, you're not doing anything new. So what does it mean to us here in Chandler First Church at the Nazarene to be a follower? As believers, to be a follower. Now, looking at Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, we read, "Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them." This is a very brief passage, but I want us to think about what is happening right here. Matthew's gospel contains 5 long sermons that were delivered by Jesus, and I know that the Pace Setters class has just finished studying this portion, so you all can hold me accountable if I get any of it wrong, right? You'll be listening closely. I know that Doyle will let me know if I get it right. So Jesus he preached 5 long sermons in the Sermon of the Mount. And from these sermons, we learned almost everything about what we know about how to love God and how to love the people around us, how to love each other. The Sermon on the Mount is the first of the big sermons, and there's a parallel in Luke chapter 6 called the Sermon on the Plain. And I don't know why you can have the same sermon on a mount and on the plain, but maybe it was because the people on the plain were listening. I don't know. But anyway, mountains are very important in Jewish literature. Whenever anybody was up on a mountain, it meant that there was something really important happening. And frequently we read that God met with people on top of the mountains, right? So the Sermon on the Mount is kind of like a parallel to when Moses went up on the mountain and God spoke to Moses face to face and gave him very important news that he said to write down. In fact, it's like this much of the Bible. This is a lot. God told Moses a lot of stuff, and he had to remember it all and write it down. But this is because Moses met with him on the top of the mountain. Jesus sat down at the top of the mountain. It was tradition for a rabbi or a teacher to sit, and the students to sit at the teacher's feet. And when I was a teacher, I had to walk around all the time to make sure I knew what everybody was doing. Because if I wasn't walking around, who knows what those guys in the 4th row are doing over there behind their desk. But in the rabbinic tradition, the teacher would sit down. It was a point of respect, and everybody would listen very carefully. So this is what was happening. So Matthew is setting the stage for us. He's saying Jesus is the teacher. He's up on a mountain, a holy place, an important place, a place that is close to God, and he's sitting down. So he's in this position of authority. So let's get ready to listen. That's what this is all about, verses 1 and 2. And then he started to speak about what the kingdom of heaven was like, and how do we love each other, and how do we love God. But he began his first sermon with the blesseds, the blessed bees, and the Beatitudes. The Greek word for blessed is makarios, and that word can be translated in several ways: to be blessed, to be happy, to be truly happy. I mean, it's a very big word, and we kind of do it a disservice if we don't pack it with lots of meaning. When we read the blessed bees, or blessed are, we have to stop and think, what does that mean? It doesn't mean, we use the word blessed so easily, don't we? What a blessing that was. Yes. But what does it mean to be a blessing? It means that God has done something unusually wonderful. You know that feeling of euphoria you get on the first day of March when you smell the citrus blossoms? To me, that's kind of like, I hope there are citrus trees in heaven. It's wonderful. But it's a feeling that you can't really put into words. And so when you read the word blessed, please think of that. Think this is something huge. And that's how Matthew begins his sermon, with saying, this is good stuff. So who was there? Look at the size of this mountain. This is the mount where Jesus was preaching, where he was sitting on it. There's a lot of room for people to be up there, right? And we read that there were several thousand people listening, hanging on every word. These people had followed him there. And you can see what kind of landscape it is. We're familiar with this. We have a lot of places like that in Arizona. They're not real friendly. You have to carry your water with you, and your hiking stick, and good shoes. No, wait, they didn't have those, did they? They really wanted to be there. These people had encountered Jesus. They had followed him. This was purposeful, intentional. They did a difficult thing and followed him up there, and they were sitting and hanging on every word. At the end of chapter 4 in Matthew's Gospel, we read that Jesus had been traveling throughout Galilee, teaching in the synagogues. He was announcing the good news of the kingdom. Good news, people. We need good news, don't we? I know somebody who gave up news during Lent because there isn't much good about it. and our news, right? Jesus was giving them good news. They lived in a world where there wasn't a lot of good news to hear also. So when we think of the gospel, the good news, pack that with meaning too. We need good news. God has good news. Jesus had good news, and that's why they were following him. He had been preaching this good news, healing people of all kinds of diseases, physical ailments, demons, paralysis, you name it, people in pain. They were flocking to him. They wanted something good in their lives. Imagine how exciting it had to be to see God's hand in motion, as these people did. Large crowds were following him from the Decapolis, that means the 10 cities, the region of 10 cities, from Jerusalem, from Judea, and from the areas beyond the Jordan. That means they had to cross the river to follow Jesus. They wanted to be there. Jesus made a big splash, and people noticed it, and they clamored to be near him. Something was going on, and they wanted to be a part of it, or at least to have a part of it. And we know that Jesus provided a very large meal a few different times when the people had been hanging around for so long that they were and hungry and they were needy. When people are needy, Jesus notices. Chapter 5, verse 1 that we just read said, now, when Jesus had come down from the mountain, they're on chapter 8. It's the same thing though. He sat down and the people were there. And now, when Jesus saw the crowds, chapter 5, verse 1, does this mean that he hadn't really noticed them before? No, of course not. But he saw them. When you read the Bible, I want you to notice how many times when you read a passage that says, Jesus looked at him, Jesus looked at her and saw. That means Jesus was really there with him, with her, with you, with me. Jesus saw the people, saw the needs. So they were amazed at his teaching and wanted to follow because he saw them. And he spoke with authority, not like any of the legal teachers that they were used to. They were shocked by the way that he was teaching them. And in chapter 8 we read, now Jesus had come down from the mountain, large crowds followed him. So what does it mean to follow Jesus? What does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? By following Jesus, do we mean that we're like those crowds who are anxious to get another touch, another meal, another healing, another entertainment? Did you see what he did last week? Let's see if he can top that this week. Don't you know that they were there too? The people that just wanted a little bit of sensationalism, just wanted, they weren't really there. They just wanted to see what's going on. They were there too. So let's hear from God's word a little bit more about what was happening right now. So please rise as we read from Matthew chapter 22, verses 35 to 39. Hearing that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" He replied, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. You must love your neighbor as you love yourself." May God add his blessing to this reading of his word. You may be seated. Now, according to Jewish literature, the rabbis and the Sadducees and the Pharisees loved to discuss, and by discuss I mean sometimes, the 613 laws that they had taken the 10 Commandments and enhanced, shall we say, to 613 of them. They were trying to trick Jesus. So which one of these 613 do you think is the most important? Teacher. Can you hear the sarcasm in their voices? Insert it if you haven't already. They were not honestly seeking an answer. They wanted to trip him so he'd fall flat and roll down the hill. He turned this debate right back on them, and he quoted from the Shema. That's from the book of Deuteronomy. Remember Moses, that guy Moses, that holy guy that went up on the mountain and got the word of the Lord? The Shema. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. They were supposed to recite this every day, twice a day. They knew this. They knew it. And Samson said, back at you, fellas. You know the answer. And this is what it is. This was a sacred, vital part of their daily devotion, required by their religion. In Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3, I think I preached on this last week. We read another story that tells the consequences of being connected to God. The Lord said to Abram, leave your land, your family, and your father's household for the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation and will bless you. I will make your name respected and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you. Curse those who curse you. I will curse. All the families of the earth will be blessed because of you. A lot of that B word right there. Blessed, 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 blessed. What does that mean? Remember, unpack that. Lots of stuff in that word blessing. Responsibilities too, right? So, being connected to God means that we will be blessed, but we will be a blessing. There's a responsibility. It's like a circle. I get it, I give it. You get it, you give it. We get it, we give it. Right?
Amen.
Are you hearing me?
Amen.
Okay. Listen, let's talk about this. Remember, it's translated as truly happy, being full of the good stuff that God has for us. Psalms begins with that Psalm 1:1. The very first word in the book of Psalms is blessed. The truly happy person does not follow wicked advice, does not stand on the road of sinners, and does not sit with the disrespectful. Okay, to be truly blessed, here's these things you don't do. We don't really live our lives by a list of what we don't do. But here, the psalmist is saying, if you want to be truly blessed, truly happy, you're going to avoid these things. Right? So the Psalms begins with this. This word occurs so many times in the Psalms, and in the Psalms, true happiness is God-centered. It's not, I want to be happy, so what do I need to do to be happy? It's not that. It's about, if I'm focusing on God, the blessedness, the truly happiness is going to follow. It's a part of that. Doesn't mean you're not going to have needs, as we've heard this morning, right? Doesn't mean we won't be needy. But if we center our lives on God, happiness will follow that. Not the happiness that depends on circumstances or situations or, the stuff that just kind of happens as we're walking down the road. No. This happiness is the type of happiness that feeds us, feeds our souls, because God is the one feeding. So when we truly encounter God, we engage with God in a vertical love, and we reach out in a horizontal love. So, what is the mission of our church? This church. Micah 6:8 states that, hear what the Lord is saying. He has told you, human one, what is good and what the Lord requires from you. Requires. This is not a suggestion. Seek justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. So what does that look like in a church? This is a powerful verse. But what does it look like when we see it, when it's happening? What are we going to see and hear and feel when we're seeking justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly with God? Well, There's teaching and training happening, spiritual formation. There's fellowship. There's compassion. There's evangelism. There's kingdom community. We gather together. We worship. We praise. We teach. We train. We reach out. We share that with other people. We make sure that we're connected to God. And then we reach out. There's that cross shape. Now, look at the back of your worship folder, the back page. Up at the top, it says, the ministers of this church are its members. Now that's from the Bible. First Peter says that we are all priests. And so each person in this room is a recipient of God's blessing, God's grace and mercy, and you are ministers of that to the world around you. You have a responsibility, people. George Barna has done a lot of research dealing with churches and churchy people and churchy things and churchiness, and he has given us some kind of disturbing statistics. He says that polling people, questioning people in churches, how many people are truly engaged in their churches is about 29%. That means out of the 100 people in here, 29 of you are really down and dirty in God's work. And about 54% of people in churches are unengaged, and about 17% of people in churches are actively unengaged, as what he calls the cave dwellers, or the CMEers, the Christians and Easter attenders. Yeah. So, okay, 29% engaged in the middle of God's work, 54% and 17% out there somewhere. That's disturbing. That means that some of us are just coming to church and warming a spot. And I don't mean to offend anybody, but maybe I should. I don't know. You know your heart. It's between you and God. But as your pastor, I want to encourage you and inspire you to dig deeper with what God has given you and asking you to do. There are 3 critical questions, according to George Barna, that will determine whether someone is actively engaged in their church or not. The first question is, in my church, do I know what is expected of me? And if you don't know what's expected of you, that's my fault. And I need to do something about it. Come and talk to me. What I expect from people in our church is that you listen to God. You join in fellowship, you listen, you pray, you join a small group, you're actively involved. And if that's all you can do is pray, that's the best. That's the best and the first thing, as we learned this morning. And my prayer mentor always says that, no, Denise. Not the least you can do is pray. The best you can do is pray. So, a prayer ministry is valuable also. So, do you know what is expected of you? The second question is, in the past 6 months, has anybody asked how you're doing? Spiritually. How are you? What's going on? You want to talk about anything? What's happening with your life? And the third question is, in my church, do I have the opportunity to do what I do best? To express my passion or my gifts. And if you don't know what that is, we can talk about that too. Perhaps you like to. This is why we're so good together. Melissa likes to cook big meals and serve them to lots of people. And I love to let her do that. Because that's not my thing, but it's hers. And Nancy, I'm going to embarrass you. She's retired. But when Melissa put out an all call for help to help in the Wednesday night meals, Nancy showed up and she says, I'm quoting, now I can do this. She's retired from food service. You never know who needs your gift. We need each other. So don't say, well, all I can do is blah, blah, blah. Maybe somebody needs that blah, blah, blah. So don't cut yourself down, sell yourself short. What do you love to do? Is there a way you can express that in the church? And it doesn't have to be inside these four walls, does it? It could be in the church, community, helping somebody out there. In Exodus chapter 4, when God, oh, I love this story. When God went to that guy who argued so much, who kept saying, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that, God. 3 times God went back. He was so patient with Moses. So patient with him. Then God finally said, what's that in your hand? And he was a shepherd. So he said, this? That's what I work with. God said, we can use that. So what's in your hand? What's in your hand this morning that God can use to do something you might not have ever even thought about? Pastor Doug, our district superintendent, Doug Pierce, likes to say, if this church closed its doors tomorrow, would anybody miss it? We would miss it. Would anybody out there miss us? If you can't think of anybody else who would be sad or go, what happened? If our church closed its doors, then we need to do a better job of sharing that good news that God has given us. We have a marvelous, wonderful gift, people. Let's not hide it. Let's not hoard it. Let's share it with the people who need it.
Amen.
Okay. Let us live the love of the cross vertically towards God and horizontally towards our people, everybody who's out there. So my vision for this church is that we encounter God. We encounter God hopefully by me spending time in the Word and bringing it to you. And also by you studying and spending time with God. Personal God, and be open. God likes to surprise people. Don't think that you understand how God might talk to you. Because you're pretty limiting when you do that. We are pretty limiting when we do that. We need to connect. We need to be together. We need to come ready to hear from God and to connect with each other and to connect with the world around us. Listen to the Holy Spirit. Make some phone calls. Invite some people. Maybe have coffee time in your kitchen and say, hey, I just was wondering how you're doing with your neighbors. Engage. We need to be willing to spend more time, more energy, more of our finances maybe even, on let God tell you. I don't presume to know what God is going to ask each of you to do. I think that this church is supposed to be a community church. If you look around us, we're not on a major highway. We're not on one of the major streets in Chandler or Gilbert. We're in a community. We're surrounded by people who need to hear good news. We're a community church. We're not the next mega church of the East Valley. We are God's hands and feet here in Chandler. And we want to drive try to determine the needs of our community. And we've talked about this in staff meeting and with Dee about how to do this, how to determine what we need here. And we have a lot of ideas, and I'll let some of the staff talk to you about them. But we want to be an expression of God's love to the people that are here, to look like our community. And I want us to be a family of faith. I want our faith to grow deeper. I want our roots to grow deep and strong and healthy so that our branches and our fruit will bear what God wants to grow in us. Over this past year, I'm going to give you my report now. Don't leave. It's not long. Okay? Over the past year, we have lost a youth pastor. We didn't really lose him. He wandered off. He's pastoring another church, and we have a new youth pastor. We have begun M3 midweek ministry meals, and Melissa will tell you a little bit more about that. We have completed our first year with Narcotics Anonymous, meeting 8 meetings a week on our campus, which, whether we ever know if any of them darken our doors in the sanctuary or not, what we're doing is enabling people to have a safe place to become healthy. And if we can help God's children become healthy people, whether they ever worship with us or not, we're doing God's work, people. So we finished the year with NA. Probably in the fall, we will be beginning a new ministry. We met with some of the administrators of that last week, called Mission of Mercy. And on the first and third Friday of every month, we will be hosting a neighborhood medical clinic in our gym. They bring, I forget how big it is, a 40-foot truck or something, I don't know, an RV that has all of the stuff they need in it. They need a location. And so we are just partnering with them. They've been in the Valley for 20 years now, and so we're really excited about that. We have a group of retired men who have a motorless, it's an airplane club. I forget what they call themselves. We call them the Airplane Boys. They're retired gentlemen, and they use our gym. They don't want to use any lights or air conditioning, so it literally costs us nothing, because the lights and the air conditioning cause currents, and that alters the flight of their airplanes. So we have opened our home to them, and we still continue our partnership with the Chandler YMCA boys. And our basketball team is doing very well, thank you very much. They've won a couple of local championships. And so they continue to practice in our gym 3 nights a week. We still have iHelp 2 nights a month. And so we're partnering with Chandler Christian Community Center in that. And as of October 1st, November 1st, I forget which, I think it was October, the Greenfield Vietnamese Evangelical Church, GVEC, started renting from us. They rent from 1 to 5 on Sunday afternoons. They pay us rent, but they are lovely people, and they joined us for our Thanksgiving dinner. And I've invited them to our Easter breakfast also. So we are partnering with other Christian organizations. We're partnering with community organizations in a desire to allow God to use our building more of the hours during the week when we're here, because we have such a beautiful building, and I don't think God wants us to say, mine, 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 nobody else can use it. I hope that didn't sound too flip or immature, but I believe that we're supposed to share. Now, your board of servant leaders is very careful and cautious about doing the right thing and asking all the right questions before we approve anything. So please be assured that they have thought all these things through. Now, for a little bit of our housekeeping stuff, in room 1, where the Narcotics Anonymous group meets, their air conditioning unit broke. It has been replaced. Room 2 has new carpeting and has been painted, and Pastor Russ has created a counter. It's almost ready to be called our family room or a living room, to have more small groups and to get ready for Alpha. Rooms 6 and 7 have new air conditioning units. And in the gym, all 4 AC units are now functional and working. And these are all thanks to wonderful donations from you folks. Thank you so much. You're so good. That was all just in the last few months. And Jeffrey Bell cannot be here this morning because he got called into work. He was supposed to be off today. But he's our facilities manager, as you see on the back of your worship folder. And he is very busy around here. He's got all kinds of plans. And I know he's been doing something because there's the 38-foot ladder in the gym, from the gym in the prayer chapel this morning. So I don't know what's been going on. But anyway, I would like to allow each of your staff to give you a brief 2 to 3 minute, seriously, 2 to 3 minutes update, starting with Pastor Andy.